and welcome to this conversation with Donna Gaywood, who is the project coordinator for the Birth to 5 Matters guidance for early education. That's a bit of a mouthful. Good morning, Donna.
Morning, good morning. I'm good. Thank you.
What we want to do today is to answer some provider questions, because we are receiving an awful lot of questions about the changes to the statutory framework for the early years foundation stage. If you have an EYFS with a date different from this one, you need to update it because it has changed. So the current date on it is 31st of March for use from the 1st of September. And the 1st of September is very close.
Yeah.
And the amount of questions we're getting is exponentially close. So let's look at what we've got. We have a new statutory framework. We have within the new statutory framework, new educational programs. The Department for Education has commissioned this guidance. If you have guidance that looks different from this, maybe it's half the size or it's not got the pictures, it's out of date. This is the latest iteration. And it's a repurposed title. You'll notice the title Development Matters, but it's a non-statutory curriculum. So it is different from the Development Matters we are currently using and we've been using for the last 8 years. And this is where Donna comes in, because Donna is project coordinator for this guidance, which is again a non-statutory. It's up to you whether you use it or not, but personal opinion, I think it's brilliant. So we're going to talk to Donna this morning all about Birth to 5 Matters. And when you get into Birth to 5 Matters, you will notice it's very similar to what you've been using. And that's because it's written by the same team, plus other people.
That's correct. Well, yeah, that's brilliant, Sarah. Thanks for that introduction. It's brilliant.
So our first question, Donna, we're starting from the beginning. Hello, new child.
Right.
Where do we go with starting points using the new Birth to 5 Matters?
Well, I think, it's Birth to 5 Matters, like you said. It's the same as the old Development Matters. So the same principles will apply. Good early years practice will be the same. So we wouldn't expect a child to come in and be settled instantaneously at all. We would give them a settling in period, which is what would be normal standard practice. And then we would start to use our knowledge of child development to think about where they're at and where the development resides. And I think the difference is slightly different. Is there's some ranges which are different. Do you want to show those if you've got them to hand?
Oh, it opens straight at that
yes
page.
Yeah, can you see those? Those are really
I've sort
important.
of worked them out in ages as well on my little post-it, just to help me, because it is new and it's different.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to pick it up and go with it straight away.
I think people will. Can I explain why they're there? Do you think that would be helpful? Because they weren't put in because we wanted to make things difficult or even more difficult for the sector that's have a bad time already. What happened was the Birth to 5 Matters, like you said, it was made by the same groups of people, but with added extras. So there was over 100 people that worked on the document. And then there was about 3, I think, consultations. They went out to consultation in the sector and people fed back what they thought of it. And I can remember sitting in one of the consultations about this whole idea of the age and stages. And people were really concerned that it was important to represent that children don't develop in a linear way. Because we know, don't we? Childminders are perfectly aware that children are all over the shop in their development. They're not just these sort of automons that go in one direction. And so when that conversation was happening as part of the consultation, people wanted to show a way. They wanted to use a way of depicting that. So they picked these kind of circles that were over there. They're ovals, actually.
They're overlapping.
Yeah, they're overlapping. And I mean, I'm a visual learner, so I think the colours are kind of quite helpful. And I think
because they feed into the next sections, don't they? And what we're looking at.
Yeah. So I mean, going back to our little person who's just started with the childminder, I mean, the thing that Birth-to-Five Matters is, it's more than just the learning and development stuff. There's like a whole raft of resources which people can use, and it's been built to be a pick up, put me down resource. So we were talking, I think, a few weeks ago about a child that doesn't stop crying, who may come into your setting. What do you do? And the Birth-to-Five Matters has got this brilliant section. I think there's some brilliant sections in the Birth-to-Five Matters, but about kind of the key person, the attachment, and sort of looking at transitions, all of those sections, because it's still, just going back to the Development Matters, it's still in those 4 categories, you know, the unique child, the positive relationships,
But we also have some lovely introductions with lots of really quality information as well as the columns. The first 50 pages are all introduction, aren't they? They're all telling us more about our work and our pedagogy and our practice and our curriculum and the learning characteristics.
Exactly.
I like the fact that PSCD, it gives us, as we're looking at the baby or even the slightly older, it gives us permission, if you like, to hug a child. You know, where you see so many settings say, well, they've come in now, they've got to start learning.
Yes.
They can't learn until the learning characteristics are in place, until they're motivated to learn, until they're engaged in what you're doing. So you have to get them to that point first.
Yes. And that's really, I think that's the key. I think we were talking, weren't we, a while ago, about someone who was concerned about having to breastfeed their child whilst looking after other children. And we talked about kind of formal learning, which is, I think, is a bit overrated, if I'm honest, and informal learning. And, you know, what the child learns when they're watching a mummy breastfeed a baby is incredible. It's an incredible piece of learning. You know, I've seen little boys, you know, breastfeeding their dollies because and that's an incredible piece of learning for a child. But I think sometimes we fall into the trap, don't we, of trying to formalize learning and think that it's kind of reading, writing, arithmetic, but actually coming into a setting and forming a warm, loving relationship, you know, like a loving pedagogy with a childminder is a massive piece of learning for a child. You know, to make that sort of secondary, tertiary attachment is really important. So yeah, I 100% agree with you.
So when a new child comes here now from September the 1st, which is very close, what we're going to be doing is we will look at the ranges very generally. We will look at the child with parents' input, obviously, with the parents' starting points. And we will think, what sort of things are they doing? What can I see? What can I hear?
Yes.
But the big difference from how we used to do it is we're keeping it very flexible, because we recognise that DFE and Ofsted are all on the same page, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah,
and they're all very clearly saying, we're not ticking boxes and we're not looking at ticked boxes. It's about the holistic, it's about the whole child.
Yeah, and I think we're going for a best fits approach. So it's kind of like what bit fits best. So yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think for childminders, my experience of childminders, I mean, I've always, you know, I've worked with childminders for a long time, and I think they're great. You know, I think they're great, and I just think they offer children something that nurseries don't, and I think childminders will probably find it when they kind of get their heads around it. I think the best fits holistic approach is more in keeping with the childminding setting, because it is a more holistic sort of, I can't even think of the word, it's more sort of on the ground approach. Do you know what I'm saying? Like a sort of a family based approach. And I think Birth-to-Five Matters is very supportive of that. That way of looking after children and being an early educator.
So when Ofsted say, you know, don't waste time when children first start, you want to be planning from day one, your planning can be holding them close, keeping them secure, making sure that they feel comfortable in the setting, seeing their photo, putting their artwork on the wall. That is all part of your individual planning. Yes. Child. Nobody is saying, you know, you've to get a 1-year-old in and start doing a theme on butterflies. That would be just ridiculous.
I mean, that is so ridiculous. No, but I think what it is that often, you know, early educators aren't very good at making visible the stuff that they do. They kind of, you know, everyone does it by sort of intuition, don't you? You know, someone's crying, we pick them up, we cuddle them. And that's so intuitive in practice, and particularly for childminders because they're in a home setting. And I think, yeah, you're right. From day one planning, you are planning for that child. You want them to be secure because you know that a child that's secure will be in a better place to learn. We know that. You know, attachment theory says that, don't they? A secure base. So yes, exactly. And then obviously as they grow and as they feel more confident and you start to get to know them. I mean, I was talking to someone last night and they were telling me how into Hey Dougie their child is. and honestly, I mean, I think Hey Dougie is really interesting. I quite like Dougie, but you know, if you know that one of the children you're with is into Hey Dougie, do stuff on Hey Dougie. It doesn't mean sitting them down and watching telly all the time, but Dougie does a lot of things. You know, you don't.
He has a toothbrushing badge.
Exactly, and he's got a toothbrushing. I know, and he's got a toothbrushing song, hasn't he? And one of the new changes is about oral health in the EYFS, isn't it? They've brought that in. So I mean, you know, we know that children are going to have to be supported to learn to clean their teeth. And I don't know if you at childminders at lunchtime whether that's something you guys do, but it would be part of your provision to bring that in. And if someone's into Hey Dougie, click on the Hey Dougie song, you know, but it's part of your EYFS provision. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know we want to get the starting points in place. We know that Birth-to-5 Matters will help us with that. And we know that Ofsted say don't waste time, plan from day one. And we know that, again, Birth-to-5 Matters will help us with that. We also know from DFE and Ofsted that they're not looking at paperwork, which is amazing, because it will free us up to really properly do our jobs and to confidently just get on and do it without feeling the need to document every step, every breath. But if you want to document, you can. So, well, I mean, you know, it's for you, not for Ofsted.
Yeah, it is for you, but also it's for the child. I mean, I'm a big believer in, you know, there's this thing, I don't know if I said, I'm sure we've talked about it, the double loop learning. You know, when you take a picture of a child at play, say they're playing with blocks, and then you show that child those blocks, there is evidence that suggests the child goes back to those blocks and then engages in a deeper level play. So it's not just for, I know it's really interesting, it's not just for grown-ups. The children will really benefit from having their learning documented and being part of it. That's the other thing about Birth-to-5 Matters. It really represents the child as a powerful learner, you know, a really powerful, that they are able to take on board their own direction in learning often, which means that when you're planning, you're kind of co-constructing with the children. So yeah, I mean, I think those documentation things are for the children to an extent as well. And if you swip it like that, it kind of makes you feel like you're not just doing paperwork for paperwork's sake, but you're doing it for the children to develop their learning.
So. Well, years ago, we used to make sort of a sheet every month when we've been doing a project or whatever, especially with our older children, just with a few photos on it, sort of a collage. This is what we've been doing to look at and talk over. And then, of course, we went into learning journeys, which became very tiresome, very onerous. Now we're moving away from that. I'm looking back at my sheets again and thinking, well, they were so good to show. And I know a lot of settings are looking at floor books as well.
Yeah,
I mean, our idea is to put photos into a PDF, into a PowerPoint, turn it into a PDF, and you can look at it like a book.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, I've made PowerPoints for children and shown them, and they absolutely love them. I mean,
and they can talk about themselves and what they've done and who they were with, and
Oh yeah.
And every year, obviously, as you do it with a new cohort of children, you'd replace and update.
And yeah, I just think I'm just thinking about you know, this idea about planning from the minute they walk through the door. You know, I can't remember the phrase you used, but
I was planning from day one. It's not the way Jill Jones, who's Deputy Director of Early Education at Ofsted, describes it, is not wasting any time.
Okay. So, I mean, just going back to, I was just thinking as you were talking then, I don't know why, but the other thing that Birth 5 Matters will help with is the enabling environment, because you know, we spend a lot of time planning what children will do, but we don't necessarily, well, not everyone, but you don't always think about where they're at and what the environment offers them. So planning for the environment is as valid as planning from day one as planning what they're going to do. It's kind of a different way of thinking about it. So you've got all the PSE sort of planning, all the kind of, all that sort of stuff, but then you've also got the kind of environment and the enabling environment. I love the enabling environments.
And the columns are as we're used to.
Yes,
and I think that for an awful lot of colleagues, unique child positive relationships, enabling environments is very reassuring.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
We're not always the best with change, but we roll with it because it happens so many times. But to come back to something that we know in the similar format, I think is hugely reassuring. And it tells you, as I said, gave permission before with a little laugh, but it tells you that you can do that and that is still okay. And that is part of your planning for the child.
Absolutely.
And to go back and, you know, if you're speaking to Ofsted and they're asking you a question, why are you doing it that way? You have this to go back to and say, well, actually, Birth to 5 Matters suggests that, and it makes sense to me for this child because this child needs this from me.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing about Birth to 5 Matters. It kind of celebrates the uniqueness of each child. So there's new sections on kind of the child in its community, and sort of the inclusive practice. I think it's inclusion and equalities. I can't remember. There's a couple of sections. There's some other sections around being able to pick the child's voice, and not the vocal voice necessarily, but the kind of non-verbal voice as well. Which, I mean, people who care for babies obviously know that. They know how children communicate, but it's very helpful for those sorts of things as well. There's a lot of practice stuff. I mean, in terms of CPD, it's really research based because you know, research has moved on since the 2000, is it 2012 the last
2012 absolutely. It was ready for a wash and brush up, but so it's brilliant that this all, you know, the EYFS changed and it gave it that opportunity
to really
to be re-looked at, and for new professionals to come in who weren't involved with the original in 2012. In the new research as well, we have, for example, self-regulation in the EYFS, and it's now reflecting that requirement, that as part of the information at the start, and then within PSED and other areas.
Yeah, I think those sorts of things are really important. And I think particularly, I mean, I don't know how you are finding it and your colleagues, but people I speak to who in practice, you know, who are working in settings, this COVID pandemic has caused children a lot of difficulty with their emotional well-being, their mental health, and some of that sort of self-regulation and the ideas around co-regulation that come through the Birth to 5 Matters are really, really important. You know, the idea that grown-ups can support children by helping grown-ups to stay calm and kind of help children sort of breathe, all that sort of stuff is all in there. And I think that's really important for because a lot of children, I don't know what your experience has been, but going into a childminder during the pandemic, it was really tricky for some children. You know, it was limited drop-offs and pickups for some people, and certainly, you know, and I think that's a challenge. I think it's going to be a challenge. And the other thing, I think, I don't know what you think, but the other challenge is the speech and language. There's a whole generation of children that just haven't had that social interaction, and there's some really great sections in Birth to 5 Matters on that sort of speech and language. That's going to be very helpful. I think the other thing just to say that's worth saying is on the website, if people want more information, there's a website, Birth to 5 Matters website, which is www.birth5matters.org, and there's a raft of
write it down and put it in the notes below.
Yeah. At www.birth5matters.org, and there's loads of resources. There's also a pile of videos of like Nancy Stewart's done a great video on the characteristics of effective learning. Chris Pascal has done a brilliant video on the changes to the EYFS and what that means in practice. Di Chilvers has done some good stuff, great stuff on the observation, assessment and planning and what that means. I'm waiting to just upload a video on a user's guide to the Birth to 5 Matters, and we're just waiting for another few to go on there, but probably by the time people hear this, they will be on. So have a look at those.
You've been busy.
Listen, I've been very, yes, I have. I'm just really keen that people feel comfortable and able to use it. I think it's a great document. Yeah,
absolutely. So we can use this document, and one of the wonders of this document is, mine's looking a bit tatty already, is that we can use it for starting points, as we've just discussed. We can use it for our observations. If we see something and we're a bit like, is that right? Is that about on track?
Yes.
We can go and check. Or if we see something we think, this child needs a little bit more than I'm giving them, we can go in and look at the enabling environment. If we have a concern about a child not settling or not feeling secure with us, we can pop in and look at the positive relationships. If we see a child who's completely unmotivated and unable to engage, we can look at the characteristics of effective learning and think, where do they take us? Can we use those in any better ways to support the child?
I'll tell you the other thing, if you've got a child who's kind of very digitally orientated, there is a new section on using digital, I don't even know the right word, sort of technology in this. You know, there was a feeling like, I don't know, I mean, I feel quite negatively, but I feel kind of worried about the digital technology with young children because I'm of a certain age. But there's been loads of research about what's good for them and what's important. And there's a whole section about that as well, because I think I kind of veer away from it, but it is there. It is there. And there's,
well, I did notice that, because obviously the early learning goals, which we don't use as childminders.
No, that's right.
Thankfully, we'll leave those to school. But the early learning goals have removed technology in understanding the world. And that's led a lot of providers to ask, well, what are we doing with technology now? And the answer is it's there, and it's in pretty much everything we do. And, you know, obviously we need to make sure it's safe, and we have our filters and we have our supervision and we teach the children, but it is still included in Birth to 5 Matters to show the importance of it in the whole curriculum. We watch books on YouTube, we look things up if the children aren't sure about something. We learned about the weather the other day because we have 2 preschoolers who wanted to know why the clouds look like they look. So we looked at pictures of clouds, and as a resource, it's absolutely brilliant as long as it's safe. It's good to see that's been retained. So again, we're going into planning, aren't we? So we've got starting points, observations, assessments, and it's there for our planning as well. We can go to the unique child, see what they're doing. So, do I want to move them on yet, or am I happy with them continuing as they are? And we can. It is such a fantastic overarching resource, and I think that's really what I want to get across to our colleagues this morning.
I think that's great. And also, I mean, I was involved with the inclusion and equalities bit, and I think the people, you know, the coalition that put it together, I think there were 16 coalition members who kind of put it together, and then 100 people, kind of practitioners, academics, and
There's 4 pages to inclusion and equality.
I know, my friend.
I was only got 2.
I know. Well, it's because it was so important, but we really wanted it to be relevant to the 21st century. You know, we've been talking about technology, and you're right. It's part of our lives. You can't take it away. It's there, and it's how we use it. And in the same way, there's real challenges for us as a society with Black Lives Matters and all the kind of sort of being able to include people who. From all different aspects who've got, and children come from all kind of backgrounds and they have lots of different experiences, and that I think it was felt that it was really important that this was a document for the 21st century. You know, we live in a very different, fast changing world, and those sections can be very supportive for you know, for you guys, for practitioners.
Well, as a practitioner, we've struggled because we would normally go to Chinatown in February, and we would do something for Diwali again in Manchester later on in the year. We would celebrate those festivals by going to the Arch and going to the places, and we haven't been able to do that last year. So to have the reassurance in this guidance that we can do it through other means, again, bringing technology in. So we watched CBeebies program on it, then reading a book, and then doing some meaningful crafts linked to what we've just been learning about.
But there's also, I mean, there's also the kind of view of the child. I think what's interesting about Birth to Five Matters, it kind of views the child in a certain way, and the child is seen as a person who brings a fund of knowledge with them. So each child comes into the setting with this wealth of their own personal experience. So drawing on the children's experiences is another way to kind of provide really good inclusive education.
It's part of cultural capital, which I often talk about, isn't it?
It is part of cultural
they often say every child arrives with, I call it a backpack. Their backpack already full of what they've learned at home. The starting point, I suppose, to an extent. And then it's our job to fill that backpack. So by the time they get to school or they move on to the next stage, they're falling over with so much skills and knowledge, but it's still room for more.
Yes, that's right. But it's also, I mean, I think we're sort of in a different topic now, but for inclusive education, it's like getting out of the backpack. How do you celebrate a birthday? You know, I said to you, I was at a wedding yesterday. Weddings are different for different people. You know, if I was Polish, I would celebrate in a certain way. If I was from a Jamaican background, if I was from a Jewish background, I would celebrate in different ways. And what's in that child's backpack in terms of how do you celebrate a birthday? How do you celebrate this? And those are all the things that children, we can fill the children's backpack, but we can bring out what they already have, and that's exciting as well, isn't it? I think
absolutely. And you know, you just link back nicely to my little idea of PDF or a PowerPoint PDF. I mean, we have 2 little books already, one on a Muslim wedding and one on a Christian wedding. But you could do that for different types of weddings or different types of birthdays or different experiences the children have, you know, their weekends away. If their parents send you some photos, you really could, because it's free, it's quick. The children can help doing it, so they're getting some technology teaching in there as well. They can make their own as they get older. And sort their own photos.
But imagine if you've got a child who is struggling with their speech and language because of the COVID, and they go away and they have a lovely family holiday in a caravan, camping, or at the beach, and their parents or their carers send in pictures, and then they're on your PDF, your PowerPoint. I mean, how fantastic to engender a sense of pride and sense of belonging and of themselves, that sense of self, but also as a starter for conversations with their key person and with their, you know, their colleagues, their peers, you know. So I think that's true too.
So it covers the whole lot, doesn't it, from really starting points through to planning. When I was speaking to Nancy about Birth to Five Matters, which I will link below again, we talked about how it supports with the progress check at 2, so I don't really want to repeat that today. But what Nancy was really saying was, if you look at the 3 prime areas and you look at the ranges and you think, is the child generally around there? Then it will give you the starter for 10 really for writing your progress checks. So it's covering that as well. But where the big question a lot of colleagues are asking is, how can it help us if we have a concern a child is not quite on track, not quite keeping up with his peers, not quite doing what we'd expect? Because there's going to be an issue with local authorities. They want some sort of grading. Before we get any support, they need to know what's the child doing. And we know that the typical way of doing it, that we've been doing it since the original Development Matters, was to put them in an age band 0 to 11, 8 to 16 or whatever. And that's not always inclusive, is it?
No. So, I mean, I think if a child's not quite doing it, it's sort of going back to sort of good SEND practice, you know, sort of like you are required by law to make reasonable adjustments, and you have to kind of do things to ensure the child can access the curriculum. So I mean, I'll give an example. This is from my own practice. I remember working in an area, and the children in the area, their writing outcomes at the end of foundation stage were really low. And I started looking at that, and I did a bit of a kind of a look around, a bit of an audit. And at the time we had all the writing in the writing area. And what was being set up was great. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the provision in terms of that bit, but no one went to the writing area. And I just thought, okay, that's really interesting. And I kind of thought about it, and I thought, is it because they don't see their parents right? What is going on here? And what I realized was there was no grown up in the writing area. So I timetabled some time for someone to go into the writing area and just write, you know, kind of just model it. And suddenly, and obviously a very popular member of staff did that. Everyone was in the writing area. It's got to start somewhere, and then you get a kind of a trend, like everyone wants to write, and you know, but in terms of when children aren't so necessarily doing what they should be doing in certain areas, what I'm trying to say is it might not be them, it might be what we're providing, or it might be that for them there's a slight barrier. Like, so for example, some children, and this doesn't really apply, I don't think, to childminders, because you have lovely small groups and they're kind of perfect, but for some children in larger settings, they just can't concentrate in a group of 30. It's too much for them, and you know, 4, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, it's too much. And then it might be that they're, you know, when they're assessed, they're coming out as behind in their communication. Well, if you bung them in a big group, they might not have the confidence to talk. So it might not be that they're behind, it might be that you're not giving them the conditions. They're like flowers, aren't they? It's like making conditions for the flower to grow, to make the group smaller. You know, it's not rocket science, but so you need to be able to do that bit first. Just check out, can they access the curriculum? Can they access what's actually happening? And then once you've kind of made reasonable adjustments, I think that's when you have to start maybe talking to the health visitors, all those sorts of things, and talking to other colleagues. But that's how I would. But I mean, there's quite a lot of information in the Birth to 5 Matters and on the website about those sorts of things.
I think the ranges are really useful for that as well. I think for a practitioner to feel confident to go to the health visitor, they could say, I've looked at the ranges and I'm getting a little bit concerned. I've put my positive relationships into practice. I've ensured that the child can access it through the enabling environments and through my knowledge of child development and what children need to be learning and doing. Yeah. And I'm still, after having done that, with this as my guide, I'm still feeling a little bit unsure. Yeah. And then they could talk, and this will give them, confidence is possibly the wrong word, but this will give them the starting point, the prompt, to say, this is what I'm seeing. Yes. Because other professionals can come in and sometimes and say, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And just to be able to say, yes. Yeah, I have actually. Because this is where I get my ideas from, and there's a wealth of information. I also use Development Matters as my curriculum guide.
Okay, that's interesting.
And the two together are telling me I've got what I need in place here, but this child still needs a little bit more.
Yeah. The other thing to maybe mention about children that might need a bit more, because I think we're going to have to wrap this up soon, but is that there's a section about working with parents as partners, which
Yes.
is more developed, isn't it? Because
Yes.
I think when, you know, we all know that when children are beginning, you know, when you've got that little concern, it is really important to talk to parents, because some children don't perform well outside of the home, but do perform well in the home. And it's kind of getting that 3-6, there she goes, yeah, positive relation. But it's very important to keep those sort of things in mind when you're making those assessments as well, that parents should be part of the assessment, because you'll get a more holistic assessment with parents. Before we go, I just wanted to say, Sarah, which we haven't mentioned, my favourite piece of the...
Yes.
Come on.
I'm sorry. Donna, what's your favourite part of Birth to
Well,
5 Matters?
No, not Development Matters. It's my favourite part of Birth to 5 Matters.
It said Birth to 5 Matters. Yeah.
Oh, did you? I thought you said Development Matters. Yeah, no, I love the glossary. I love the glossary. I love the glossary because I think it's really empowering for practitioners. It's got all the words in the background that you need. So if someone walks in and says to you, oh, what's your pedagogy? And you think, I don't even know what a pedagogy is, or pedagogy.
And we say it differently.
I know, I can't help it. I always say it the other way. You can look at it and you know, it's really super duper helpful. Yeah, that's right. It's so super duper helpful. I mean, I was saying to someone, I don't know if it was to you, you know, some of the maths, I mean, the maths, I have to say, the maths section in the Birth to 5 Matters is quite incredible. It's really supportive. It's stunning. But some of the words are quite scary, actually, if you're not a maths specialist. But in the glossary, it's brilliant. I mean, I was looking it up, and I think you and I had a conversation about curriculum quite a while ago, and I was thinking after that conversation, what's curriculum? I mean, I know what curriculum is, but you know, you think, I'm not quite sure what that means, you know. And I just looked it up in the back and thought, oh right, because it's really supportive. And that's my favorite bit, because I think people, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I think childminders can often be or feel maybe that they're not as what's the word, not as well thought of, or they're a bit looked down upon. But I think childminders know their stuff, but sometimes there's a lacking in confidence that can help with, you know, because anyone can befuddle you with a long word. But that doesn't mean that you don't know your stuff. It means that you haven't quite mastered a long word yet, because they're just a way of talking about the stuff. Does that make sense?
I think it's a good way for training staff as well, to give them a section at a time and to read through, and then to have a discussion about in supervisions and in training, and to say, let's all upskill. I think there's so much CPD in this, not just for the individual childminder, but for their staff as well.
Yeah, no, I think
the other place I go for advice is on the expressive arts and design. I will use Musical Development Matters to support the musicality, and that's another early education product that's free, and I will link below.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, brilliant.
I find that really useful.
Yeah, that's excellent. Right.
Donna, thank you so much for this conversation this morning. I really hope it helps our colleagues.
Yes.
I have been Sarah Neville. You have been Donna Gaywood.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.